plans should adequately put children at the center and ensure that they succeed in life. We note with encouragement that this is the goal for the OECS member countries of the OECS education sector strategy. And this particular goal also ties in nicely with CARICOM's conception of the ideal Caribbean person. No child desires to fail. They all want to succeed. That is why they wake up every morning to prepare for school. Yet we see that in the CXC, for instance, less than 1/3 of all children attain the required pass rate. Have we ever pondered to ask ourselves what this means for children and their future? They desire a better life. They go to school aspiring to be doctors. They want to be aeronautical engineers. They want to be actuarial scientists, pharmacologists, priests, good teachers, presidents, and prime ministers. And let me put again here, give you a story briefly, if time allows me. Once I interviewed a grade 4 pupil in one of the islands on the second month of my being in Barbados, and I asked him, that boy, what he wants to be later on in life. He pondered for a while and responded that he wants to be the prime minister of that particular island in the year 2037. He's a grade 4 pupil, a boy. This boy calculated the election cycle, his age, and when he would have finished school, and chose that particular year, 2037. This is a child who has very clear goal in life, but we may frustrate him with an education system that does not put him under the care of well-prepared and equipped teachers, education managers, secure, learner-friendly, and learner-ready classrooms, and conscientized parents who would help him with his aspirations. And I want to submit that every other child in the Caribbean, as indeed in every other part of the world, is just like that. They desire to be the Usain Bolts of the future, and education plans must help them identify and develop these talents from an early age. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite us all on behalf of children for whom UNICEF stands and works as mandated by the United Nations General Assembly, of which all your member countries have a stake. I invite us to take this path and dream and translate those dreams into the best education plans that help children be the best they can be. The course we will go through in the next 5 days is designed to help us achieve just that. Not that we do not have these capacities, we do have them, yes. But we want to make these capacities even better. Let us therefore live up to the challenge so that when we eventually exit the scene, we will have made our efforts in helping our countries arrive at the place we can dream of now, or that we dreamt of yesterday, and that will remain indelibly printed for future generations to see. We can then rest in peace if we do that. But a final call is, let us see learning as a call. Let us not see it as a routine thing we do and go home. Let us see it as an obligation we have to our children, to ourselves, to our children's children, to our country, region, indeed to the society and to posterity. It is for this reason that we are all very grateful to the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the ministries of health from our respective countries, and the Ministry of Education here, and the National Commission for UNESCO for making this particular workshop possible, and for making it possible for all of you to be part of our dream. For that is why you are all here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Otieno, for inviting us all to dream beyond. And we look forward to sharing more of your optimism and experiences in the days ahead, especially in terms of exploring the potential of edutourism, as you mentioned, to help our children be all that they can be. I would now invite Dr. Martin Batiste, he's the education specialist to bring greetings from the UNESCO International Institute for Education Planning in Paris.
Tim Gopi Singh, Minister of Education, Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Anton de Gros, Senior Program Specialist, IIEP, UNESCO Paris. Mr. Robert Perua, UNESCO Cluster Office, Kingston. Distinguished colleagues from the UNESCO National Commission here in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Wycliffe Otieno, Chief of Education, UNICEF. Members of our distinguished colleagues from Ministries of Education across the region. Partners and friends from Ministry of Education in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As a graduate of IIEP, I did not mind for one brief moment that our chair recognized my association with IIEP. But I bring you greetings from the President, Management and Staff of the Caribbean Development Bank in Barbados. And we wish to let you know that we are quite pleased and happy to participate and collaborate with our different partner agencies in supporting this very timely and important event. The CDB, as everyone knows, has a very principled mandate of supporting poverty reduction in the borrowing member countries of the Caribbean region. And we have sought over the last 40 years or so to pursue this task with tenacity and to stand with our countries as best as we can based on your development agenda to support your movement from our post-colonial history into a modern era where everyone succeeds, work is available, and life progresses well. Our work in education is based on our policy and strategy, which promotes and encourages the systematic development of an adequate institutional framework for development of the education sector. And to that degree, the bank has supported and continues to support the development of sector planning of various countries. We have supported sector plans in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, and other countries. And just recently, last year, we also was part with the World Bank and other agencies in supporting the development of the OECS education sector strategy. Our understanding is that education planning sits at the center of what we do in the education system, and that you and I, as education planners, need to take this job very seriously. For in many ways, our countries would move based on the systematic improvement of the education sector as we try to build the human capital needed for the development of our countries. What we know is very clear, that in doing our sector plans, we have moved from our historical experience from the colonial commissions of the past, where the design of our system was determined by the ideas of those who were our masters. And we've now moved to a national planning process that is led by very competent and effective planners, supported by policy directives from governments as we seek to define the agenda for children's development. And in doing so, we seek some very simple things. One, that the analysis is sound, that the policy goals are aspirational, as Wycliffe said, but also feasible, that the strategic framework is comprehensive yet coherent, that the implementing mechanisms are effective, for it's not enough simply to define the plan. Our aim is to implement them and to get results, that the monitoring and evaluation systems are functional, and that the reporting to our principals and our stakeholders happens. To this end, the bank supports this workshop here this week, and we urge that as you deliberate and discuss and share your experiences, that it will strengthen your resolve and your capacity to go back to your countries and within the region to continue this enterprise of systematic planning that is part of our history at this time. We also at the bank wish to encourage and promote the fact that as we do these plans, the focus is not just on the activities, our focus is on the outcomes and the results. For in the end, if we are to borrow the lines from our distinguished host, Trinidad and Tobago, in the end, what we want is that every person finds his place. And it may be Prime Minister in 2037, and then God will bless our nations. Thank you.
esteemed guests, colleagues, friends. It's always difficult to follow a previous speech. It's particularly difficult to follow the performance of Che Gonzalez, which was really quite impressive. This workshop brings together planners from quite a large number of countries in the Caribbean. It also will focus on a topic very much related to planning, strategic planning. I've been working for nearly 20 years now in the Institute for Educational Planning, so it's maybe a little unwise to start this introduction with a criticism of planning. But I think it is useful to do that because we have to recognize that many countries have made plans, many nations have developed strategic plans, sector plans, and quite regularly, unfortunately, these plans have failed. I think there are two main reasons for this. The first one is that we live in times of increasing uncertainty. This is certainly true in this particular region, in this particular region where outside forces, be they human or natural, have a big impact on our region, and an impact which is generally difficult to foresee, an impact which we do not control. And plans may at times create an illusion of stability, which in itself is then a cause for their failure. Secondly, the education system is a very complex system. Many factors that have an impact on education are interrelating. When you change one thing, you cannot always see how many other things will change. If we simply think of the example of how to improve quality, there are so many different factors that have an impact. And when we try in a plan to integrate all of these factors, we tend to fail. And then what we do is we simplify, and as a result, we don't see the whole picture. So there are some reasons to be careful when we do planning. And in itself, those criticisms are not an indictment of planning as a whole. They are an indictment, they are an accusation, if you want to say, of a specific type of planning. And the purpose of this workshop, to a large extent, is to try to construct together a more successful way of planning is to think together on a more constructive way of planning, following the guidelines that Martin was giving us. And we're very lucky in this region, I think, to be able to share and to be able to learn from a number of good examples in the region, a number of good plans in the region that have been developed in a very participatory manner and have at the same time allowed countries to indeed move forward. Indeed, I think that one big advantage or one big asset of any planning process is that it offers an opportunity for all of the different stakeholders in society who are committed to the education system to come together, an opportunity too for them to reflect together on a common vision, on the goals that we want to achieve, on the priorities that we consider to be particularly important, and on the strategies that we feel can be successful. As such, this reflection on planning can be a genuine mobilization process, and it can be a way of gaining commitment from all of the different stakeholders in society. And we know, it's a bit of a jargon, but we know that without that commitment from all of the different stakeholders in society, education will not move forward. Because education finally takes place in the classrooms, the thousands of classrooms throughout our region. At the same time, such a form of what we tend to call then strategic planning helps to build bridges between policymakers and technical experts who may from time to time have different visions. Even if they share the same dream, the way they want to approach that dream and achieve that dream is not always the same. And strategic planning will allow for those different groups to come together and to reflect together. So that will be to a large extent the objective of this workshop. At the same time, the question may come up, why do we bring people together from many different countries when in principle strategic planning, the development of a plan, is to a large extent a national activity? Here again, I think there are two main reasons. The first one is that because many of the countries around the table are fairly small countries, in many cases planners are occupying a relatively isolated position. We are not in a situation of big ministries where we have groups of 7, 8, 9 planners and so on. We are in a situation where in a ministry we in many cases have a planning division that consists of 1 or 2 people. And therefore bringing people together will offer them the opportunity of forming to some extent a network, of thinking together, of reflecting together, of indeed building together our skills and learning very much from each other. At the same time, while we have 20 countries around the table, at the same time our region is very much in need of building a stronger regional identity. That identity exists already, but it still needs to be more and more reflected in a regional approach. We know that the outside forces have a big impact. We know that their interest is in general not in the interest of progress within the Caribbean, but that their interest is self-interest. And we know that the only way of building genuinely a strong bastion, if that is the right term, to counter those external forces is to strengthen the national and the regional identities within the Caribbean. I look forward to working with you, and I thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. All courtesies and protocol observed. Honorable Tim Gopusing, Minister of Education, my dear colleagues from CDB, UNICEF, UNESCO National Commission, distinguished participants from the Caribbean. It is my pleasure and honor to be here today at the opening of the Capacity Building Workshop in Education Planning for the Caribbean. UNESCO's mission is to build peace, eradicating poverty, promoting sustainable development, and intercultural dialogue through education. The sciences, culture, communication, and information. UNESCO's core mission is to ensure the right to education, right to quality education, a reality for every child, youth, and adult. UNESCO's 4 global strategic priorities in education are literacy, teachers, TVET and skills development, and sector-wide planning to advance the EFA agenda. This workshop is to respond directly to the needs of the member states and further strengthen the institutional capacities in sector-wide planning. In light of globalization, rapid economic growth, global financial crisis, and socio-cultural changes have engendered new challenges for human resource development in the Caribbean. And the small island developing state seats of the Caribbean have made remarkable progress in terms of access to basic education for all. However, the current education systems are currently confronted with increasing expectations to expand education and training at post-basic levels, improve the quality of education provided at all levels, and increase the relevance of education and training programs for employment and sustainable livelihood in general. In order to make real progress in education, countries must have a clear vision of their priorities and how to achieve them. It is indeed pleasing to know that many ministries of education in the Caribbean have prepared strategic plans which reflect this vision in alignment with national socioeconomic frameworks. The main purpose of this week's workshop is to assess the possibility of establishing a Caribbean regional network on education planning to share good practice and provide the participants with an opportunity to discuss priorities and strategic challenges and empower education planners and senior education officials with the necessary knowledge, techniques, and skills to prepare quality strategic plans. Ladies and gentlemen, the international development partners and the UN system will discuss the post-2015 agenda, which will focus on many themes including education in St. Lucia this week. To discuss the Caribbean perspective on post-2015 agenda. As you all know, the EFA and MDG goals will now come to an end in 2015. So the international community is now discussing what would be the new agenda for 2015 and onwards. The UNESCO Regional Bureau in Santiago will also organize the EFA TRELAC meeting in Mexico at the end of this month to assess the progress made in EFA in Latin America and the Caribbean. This education planning workshop is indeed relevant and timely, which will assist you, the planners, in aligning the international goals that will be set after 2015 and to integrate them in your strategic plans. I wish to further reiterate UNESCO's ongoing strategic education priorities in the Caribbean: strengthening quality assurance in higher education, strengthening early childhood education programs, enhancing or strengthening capacities in inclusive education, promoting ICT policies and master plans in education, TVET and skills development. This year in May, we had a very successful global conference on TVET and skills development, trying to emphasize the shift towards skills development. And I must congratulate the Minister for Education in chairing the final session of the Shanghai conference that has concluded a very, very important communique called the Shanghai Consensus. And Minister, thank you very, very much for that leadership at that conference. The other priorities that the UNESCO Kingston is pursuing in the Caribbean are in terms of the monitoring the achievement of education for all and MDG goals by 2015, education statistics in terms of the data collection, analysis, and reporting, which the Kingston office, cluster office, has done a lot of work on that. Education for sustainable development. In terms of the new emerging issues, climate change education is also becoming one of UNESCO Kingston office's top priorities. And finally, the strengthening of education sector response to HIV and AIDS and disaster risk reduction. It's very important. The 2000 EFA Dakar Framework for Action has highlighted that education must pursue the goals of access, equity, relevance, and quality simultaneously, underlining the need for strengthened national institutional capacities. we must acknowledge and take note of the significant challenges in terms of financial and human resource constraints faced by education planning units within the Ministries of Education in the Caribbean. Are the current existing education sector strategic plans credible and effectively responding to the challenges and needs of the countries in the Caribbean? In order to respond to these challenges in a consistent and sustainable manner, education systems need careful planning, programming and budgeting, as well as midterm reviews to keep on track and achieve the educational development goals. I wish to stress that an effective diagnosis, preparation, and implementation of education sector strategies must be closely aligned with national socio-economic development plans and priorities. I wish to note that almost all Caribbean states or small island developing states have developed in recent years one or more credible medium-term strategic plans for the education sector. And I think this workshop is very critical to share your experiences of some of the countries that have developed some very good sector plans with the countries that have not prepared. Some countries have not prepared or may have some very brief policy statements. So I think this is a very good opportunity for the US participants to share your experiences. Reflecting on that conviction, and effective planning contributes towards good governance and can build inclusive and responsible education systems. The drafting and implementation of these plans have not followed the same steps everywhere and have been more successful in some countries than in others. This is mostly due to a lack of capacity in some countries or a lack of valid and reliable data. As a result, some plans pay insufficient attention to core issues on the agenda now in the Caribbean, such as the relationship between education and the world of work, skills development, ICTs, the need to improve quality and objective of universalizing secondary education. It is indeed a very long process, and I want to assure you that UNESCO is deeply committed to assist and empower education planners and managers to be given the necessary tools to play a significant role in designing, implementing, and monitoring of quality strategic plans. I just want to also add that our Institute for Education Planning is one of the 4 specialized institutes that UNESCO has worldwide. IEP has been doing a tremendous work in terms of training education planners. I think we have over 4,000 to 5,000 education planners trained worldwide, and it is a remarkable achievement. And they are now playing some very strategic role in driving the education reform process in many countries. And Anton, I thank IEP for that contribution since 1963, when this specialized institute was established with the support of the French government and other very important donors. Finally, I wish to conclude by expressing my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the Honorable Minister of Education to host this workshop in Trinidad, and to all the institutional partners, UNESCO IAP, Caribbean Development Bank, UNICEF, Trinidad and Tobago Ministry of Education, and Trinidad and Tobago National Commission for UNESCO. UNESCO, in ensuring the success of this capacity building workshop, I want to further emphasize that the partnership with these institutional partners has just begun. And we are fully committed to ensuring that every country will have to develop good quality education sector strategic plans. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parra, for sharing with us that vision for quality and inclusive education, and of course for bringing together our head panel here, a mixture of politics, policy, planning, and of course the finances, which is very, very important to make progress. We have in Trinidad and Tobago with the Minister of Education, who is also the President of the National Commission for UNESCO, something that we in the Caribbean tend to think is a very rare quality, political will. and a formidable force for advancing programs like these. I now invite the Honorable Tim Gopi Singh to share with us some plans of education for Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dr. Chris Rampersad, Chair of National Commission for UNESCO. Dr. Wycliffe Otieno, Chief of Education, UNICEF. Dr. Martin Batiste, Education Specialist, Caribbean Development Bank. I make sure it's not the IADB. Dr. Anton de Groot, Senior Program Specialist and Head and Technical Assistance and Sector Planning, UNESCO International Institute for Education Planning. Mr. Robert Parua, who I have met many occasions in UNESCO meetings around the world, and he spoke about the one in Shanghai recently in May, where we did a tremendous amount of work on the technical vocational education and training, the Shanghai Declaration. Mr. Robert Parua, thank you for being with us in the Caribbean and working with us in this area. Caribbean participants of the Education Planning Workshop, all 20 countries which have been mentioned previously, members of our National Commission for UNESCO, representatives from UNESCO and the OECS Secretariat, of course representatives from our own Ministry of Education here in Trinidad and Tobago, members of the media, Secretary General and staff of the National Commission for UNESCO, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. A very pleasant good morning to one and all, and I'm honored in my capacity as President of the National Commission for UNESCO to welcome all of you at this very important UNESCO IIEP CDB Education Planning Workshop. Today marks the beginning of a very important three-day conference, which will be marked by very relevant, timely, and necessary discussions on education and planning. And it is my wish that we, at the end of these 3 days, each country will move from here feeling very satisfied in the way that they will analyze their own planning, which they have been doing, and if there are added ingredients in this workshop that they may take away from it to continue to advance their professional capacity and their education building in their respective countries. I had a little speech prepared for me, but I think I will deviate from that by indicating that we're all in the process of education. All of us are here this morning. Many of you are planners, and as the Minister of Education, you're all constrained by the parameters of your various ministries, of your ministries of education, possibly Ministry of Science, Technology, and Education as well. We in Trinidad and Tobago have two ministries, one Ministry of Education from ECC to primary to secondary to post-secondary, and then a Ministry of Tertiary Education, separate and distinct with skills training. So you may understand your own configuration in your country. Now, you are planners in education for your own country. And what do you plan on education? Is it in the context of what your government want to do? Are you aware of what your governments have on their manifesto? Are you aware what your financial capacity and constraints are? Are you aware of the bureaucracies within your own system, that despite your plan, you may continue to plan and you are stagnated? And there is a paralysis at times in terms of the implementation. Then how do you work with your ministers of education in your government? Is your planning in congruence with the planning of the ministry? Now, how do you see yourselves? So we have a specialist from UNESCO here to guide us forward on the planning methodologies. What are your objectives for your countries? What are your goals? What is your vision? What is your mission statement? And if you have your objectives and your goals clearly defined, what strategies do you use to accomplish these goals? And what milestones and targets do you use to assess your performance as planners? And is your planning realistic or unrealistic? And then do you have something to tell you where you are as a country with the rest of the world in terms of your education system? So you form a team together and you begin a strategic plan. And is it a continuation from the last administration's plan? Do you see something new in your planning? Are you re-engineering the process of education in your country? Are you effecting a paradigm shift in your education system? Do we do things the way we were accustomed doing it? Or do we jump out of the box and move in a different way? And I think all of us will realize that one of our distinguished colleagues spoke about having inherited a system that was akin to the British system of education. And are we continuing in this mode? Do we need to look at systems around the world to see where we are? Do we look to the Asian countries of South Korea and Japan and Singapore and Hong Kong and the countries of Europe, Finland? And do we compare ourselves with Great Britain, the United States, Canada? What do your governments put for funding? What percentage of your GDP is used for your funding? And how do you contextualize your planning in relation to your funding? Is there a wastage of money in certain areas? And can you use the money more strategically to do what you need for education? And I could sit with you here and talk for the entire day on what is happening here in my country and where we are going. And undoubtedly, we have, as a Minister of Government, when I came in 2.5 years ago, I had to understand and appreciate the work that had been done by my predecessors. And I am a person carrying the baton on since an independent nation in 1962, carrying the baton for my previous ministers of education. Then what reports and plans and programs they had, and where am I in the context of where they had wanted to go? Do we make a break? Do we continue? And so therefore it is important for all of us as planners to see what reports and programs and policies that have been enacted in your countries and have been sitting on the shelves gathering dust. And then we plan and plan and plan, but the plans have already been there before. Now, do we search for what these plans are? Do we scourge the shelves, empty the shelves, and devour the work that had been planned previously and see whether they are still relevant in the present context? Do you sift the best things out from them and move forward with what you may want for yourselves? So you are charged with that responsibility, Caribbean planners. And now, how do we see ourselves with the rest of the world? UNESCO has some very noble and worthy goals. Education for all by 2015. We all understand the Millennium Development Goals as well. And wherever you go in any part of the world, there are about 3 or 4 areas that come up with education. Quality education, accessibility, equity, and teacher training and development. Wherever you go. I've been to a few conferences in Latin America and the East and so on, a number with UNESCO and a number with the GRULAC group, the group of Latin American and Caribbean countries, sponsored by UNESCO, with a cluster office, one in Jamaica, and then we work with Chile as well. So what does the planning entail? Where we are, where do we want to go? How do we go there? And this is your responsibility as planners to understand where you are. Then you assess yourselves. In the English-speaking Caribbean, in our 20 countries, what is our population? Our population is close to about 12 to 15 million people within the Caribbean, in our 20 countries. But we are small in comparison to the rest of the world. There's, Mr. Parua will tell you that in UNESCO there is 9 countries, with 9 countries around the world with more than 50 million students in their education system. India, China, Nigeria, Pakistan, etc. What do we have in the Caribbean? 12 to 15 million students. 12 to 15 million people. How many students? So it is important for us to assess ourselves, but we are in the midst of a global economy and a globalization process where we have to understand what is applicable there in their countries, is it applicable here? We in Trinidad and Tobago spend, as the Honorable Prime Minister in the manifesto had indicated, that human capital development was one of the 7 fundamental pillars to achieve sustainable development. ICT was another area. Reduction of poverty is another area. So human capital development, education is of paramount importance to that. And therefore it is written in our manifesto, what do we want to do to ensure that there is human capital development. Many of us in our Caribbean and countries have lost generations in our education process, and we cannot continue to lose generations. So where do we begin? What are the issues facing the education system? Is it one of low literacy and numeracy? Is it one of decreased academic performance? Is it one of dysfunctional behavior and ill discipline in schools? Is it one of reduction in teachers' energy drive and commitment? Is it one where there is less parenting? Is there a need for more technical vocational education? Is there a need for changing of your curriculums to meet the present day requirements? Do we need to put more physical education in our schools and visual and performing arts? Do we need to have a different method of assessment for our students rather than just the academic assessment? These are questions we must ask ourselves as planners, to see ourselves in the context of what we really want to achieve. And then do we engage the rest of the international community in assessing our own education system? You know the TIMSS study on mathematics and science. You know the Pearl study on literacy and reading. And you know the PISA study, which is the International Student Assessment. Where is your country in the midst of all of that? What do you want for your country? To be a leader in education and want to be the best in the world. That's the goal you must set as planners. So that collectively as a Caribbean region, we will be the best in the world. Despite the fact that we are SIDS, small island development states. We ought to be the best because we have the small population, and we should be able to manage our small population very easily. And I can provide the stats as a Minister of Education for you, and I can rattle it off because I know it, where we are. I have 250,000 students, 126,000 primary school students, 96,000 secondary school students, more than about 6,000 or 7,000 early childhood education students in the formal setting, 34,000 in the non-formal setting. I have 476 primary schools, 152 secondary schools, 200 early childhood education centers. And this is where you have to plan. This is where you have to plan. What is your academic achievement? For each one of your schools, what has been happening to your schools? Where is technical vocational education? Where is career path development? Whereas science and technology, the new STEM approach to education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so, I'm just questioning your minds as planners. Begin to think out of the box, not the conventional way. And I think we will be moving tremendously as a Caribbean community, and we'll be telling the rest of the world we have a sound education system. I, as Minister of Education in Trinidad, share some of my plans with my colleagues from the Caribbean islands who I meet from time to time at various international conferences. In fact, my Honorable Prime Minister has given me leave to attend a session of Ministers of Education of the world being held in London sometime in another week and a half, where we will exchange ideas and the best way forward and what is the best practice around the world. And we will, of course, learn from some of the Asian countries. And my colleague here is with me this morning, Mr. Jiwan Ramcharita, who was former Managing Director of PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's my technical advisor, senior partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers. On institutional strengthening and organizational restructuring, I have 16,000 teachers, about 8,005 in primary schools, certain 7,005 in secondary schools, etc. The teacher-to-student ratio, then you have to look at your infrastructure and the environment in which the students learn. So all of these things we had to do. We did our business strategy report within 6 months of coming into office, and we produced a strategic plan 2011-2015, which we prioritized 16 areas for movement forward. And we continue to work assiduously in those 16 areas. Our laptop initiative, where we would have given out 85,000 laptops to school students through the 5-year period that we're in government. Computerization of our schools with laboratories, computer labs, Wi-Fi, broad-ranging internet connectivity, technical assistance in computerization, interactive whiteboards for our schools, and so on. Then the universal early childhood education. I charge all of you here this morning to make this an imperative for your countries, because this is the way that the world has to go. 70% of the intellectual development of our children reside within the first 7 years of life. And if we lose our students within the first 2-3 years, after 3, 4, and 5, we'll be losing a substantial part of the education system. This is where the background of the education of our children reside. So are we focusing on early childhood education, primary school education? Then we have special needs. You all know that there are thousands of students in the Caribbean and the world at large suffer from difficult issues, disabilities like dyslexia, autism, and emotional, behavioral, and psychological abnormalities, hearing deficiency, visual deficiency, and so on. How many thousands of those students are in your school population? How are you planning for them? What are you deciding to do? This, when we leave and we go back to the ministry, I'm meeting with a technical team who have already been assigned the consultancy to ensure that we move ahead very quickly on this area for us, on special needs. Teacher training and development, improve academic performance, literacy and numeracy, STEM education, infrastructure in your schools, continuous assessment component, is it necessary in your schools? School-based management, reorganization of your ministries of education, institutional strengthening, organizational restructuring, information-related human resource management information systems, technical vocational education. How many of your students who are not necessarily very strong in academic performance, they might be better suited in technical vocational education? How do you streamline them and bring them back into the mainstream of your education programs? Career guidance for our students leaving during the secondary schools and leaving secondary schools to go into the world of work and in fact the postgraduate education programs. Parenting, how are we dealing with the issue of parenting or weak parenting? And these are some of the areas that we at the Ministry of Education have looked at and prioritized. And I have the pleasure, for those of you who are interested, to provide for you. I have copies, 20 copies of, there they are, my communications person. We have 20 copies of our business strategy report and our strategic plan of 2011 to 2015, where we are rolling over into 2012-2016. And I will ask the Commission to present to each one of the Caribbean countries our strategic plan and business strategy report. It may be of help, and you may see yourselves in the context of what we are doing and where we are with you on that. So as I close, distinguished participants, distinguished organizations of United Nations, UNESCO, UNDP, UNICEF, the Caribbean Development Bank. I'm not speaking about IADB this morning, but they are helping us as well. And all distinguished educators, we warmly welcome you to Trinidad. We hope that you have a very productive 3-day stay, that you come out of this with flying colors, with the energy to move forward in your individual countries, to take your plans back, and that you will continue to work for beloved students of the Caribbean countries, those that you see whose hearts of hope and joy is an expression of joy when you see these beautiful children. And I'm sure that you will continue to work very closely together, and we can continue to share our experiences together, facilitated by some of the organizations. I also want to wish you to enjoy some of our carnival activities, some of our mass camps, and some of our steel barnyards. I hope that provisions are made for that. And I look forward to meeting you at some time within the next 3 days. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now you understand what I meant when I said a formidable force for coming, for delivering the programs that you might be planning from this workshop. All that's left for me now is to thank you all for being here. I thank the members of the head table, and certainly those who have contributed to making this opening ceremony and the workshop that's going to happen over the next 4 days a success. Certainly the Secretary General and the Secretariat of the National Commission for UNESCO, our student pan player, Shay Gonzalez, for that excellent rendition of O Lady Walk a Mile and a Half. Yes. And without much further ado, we'll break now before you move right into your session. So thank you.